Welcome back to Chapters Unfolded. Glad to have you here for our fifth deep dive into atomic habits.
5 already. Wow, time
I
flies.
know, right? It feels like just yesterday we were starting this whole thing.
And we're still uncovering new things with each chapter. It's amazing.
Absolutely. For any new listeners out there, we break down a whole book chapter by chapter.
Trying to really get into the details and understand all the nuances. Yeah.
Yep. And today is all about how habits work subconsciously, like on autopilot.
Fascinating stuff, right? And it gets even wilder.
Oh, do you tell?
Well, James Clear starts the chapter with this story about a paramedic and her father-in-law.
Okay, paramedics, lots of intense situations. I'm intrigued.
Oh, it's intense, all right. So she had this gut feeling something was wrong with him.
Even though, he said he felt fine.
Exactly. But she insisted he go to the hospital, and guess what?
He was actually sick.
Turns out he was on the verge of a massive heart attack. She basically saved his life.
Wow, that's incredible. But how? Did she see something specific?
That's the crazy part. There wasn't anything obviously wrong. But the book explains that when arteries get blocked, blood flow changes, especially in the face.
So her brain just picked up on that, like some kind of superpower.
In a way, yeah. Years on the job had trained her brain to recognize this pattern subconsciously.
That's wild. So she didn't even realize she was doing it.
It was all happening beneath the surface. Pretty cool, huh? And it really emphasizes this idea that Clear talks about a lot. Our brains are like prediction machines.
Prediction machines, like they could see the future,
Not exactly, but they're constantly analyzing everything around us.
trying to anticipate what's going to happen next.
Exactly, based on all our past experiences.
So it's not magic. It's just our brains being super observant without us even knowing.
Precisely. Like, think about those stories of military analysts.
Oh yeah, the ones who can tell if a blip on the radar is a friend or foe instantly.
Exactly. Or art experts who can spot a fake just by the brushstrokes.
It seems impossible, but really it's their brains making lightning-fast connections.
Years and years of training lead up to that kind of expertise.
Okay, that's all super fascinating. But how does this brain prediction machine thing connect to habits?
Well, just like our brains predict a heart attack or a fake painting, they predict and trigger habits too.
Without us even thinking about it.
You got it. You don't decide to brush your teeth every morning, do you?
True. It's just kind of automatic,
Right. The sight of your toothbrush is the cue, and boom, the routine starts.
which is great for good habits, but for bad ones, not so much.
Yeah, we fall into those patterns unconsciously too. Remember that story Clear tells about the retail worker?
The one who accidentally shredded a customer's credit card instead of the gift card?
That's the one. So funny, but also kind of scary, right?
Definitely. It just shows you how powerful these unconscious actions can be.
And how easily they can go wrong.
So if it's all happening on autopilot, how do we even begin to change those bad habits?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
It's not like we can just decide to be more aware and poof, they're gone.
You're right, it's not that simple. But Clear does offer some really insightful tools and strategies. One that I find particularly interesting is the pointing and calling technique.
Pointing and calling, what's that? Some kind of meditation thing?
Not quite. It's actually a technique used by the Japanese railway system.
The railway system. Okay, now I'm really curious.
So picture this: train conductors literally point at and call out every single action they perform.
Like signal is green
Mhm.
or doors closing.
You got it. It might sound a bit much, but this simple act drastically reduces errors and accidents.
Really? Just by pointing and saying things out loud.
It forces them to be present in the moment, to break free from that mindless routine.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this might connect to habits, but can you give me an example?
Sure. Imagine you're craving a donut, and instead of grabbing it without thinking, you pause, point, and say out loud, "I'm reaching for this donut, even though I know it'll make me feel sluggish later."
Yeah, I can see how that would make you think twice before mindlessly munching.
It's about disrupting that automatic routine by bringing deliberate attention to what you're doing.
Like a real-time gut check.
Exactly. And Clear takes this idea a step further with what he calls the Habits Scorecard.
Habit Scorecard. Sounds intriguing. What is it?
It's basically a list of your daily habits, the good, the bad, and the neutral.
Oh, so you write down everything you do in a day.
Well, not every single thing, but you try to capture the key habits, those repeated actions and behaviors.
I see. And what do you do with this list once you have it?
The goal is to simply become aware of what you're actually doing throughout your day. Just kind of taking stock of your actions and patterns.
Okay, that sounds doable. So like waking up neutral, Brushing my teeth, that's a plus.
Exactly.
And scrolling through social media for an hour before bed, yeah, that's definitely a minus.
Ha. I think we've all been there.
But I gotta ask, how do we even decide what's good or bad in the first place? Seems kind of subjective, right?
It is to some extent. But instead of good or bad, Clear suggests thinking about it as effective. Yeah. Does this habit help me become the person I want to be? That's the real question.
So it's all about whether a habit aligns with my goals.
Exactly.
Like a daily walk is effective if I'm aiming for fitness, but maybe not if I'm trying to finish writing a novel.
That's a great way to put it. It takes the judgment out of the equation.
Makes it more about aligning your actions with your aspirations.
Right. And it's important to remember that even with the Habit Scorecard, the first step is simply awareness.
Okay, baby steps. But how does just knowing about a bad habit actually help us change it?
That's where the power of consciously disrupting those automatic routines comes in.
Okay, remind me. How does that work again?
Think back to those Japanese train conductors pointing and calling out their actions.
Right. Seems silly, but...
It forces them to be present, right?
Yeah.
To break free from mindless repetition.
So are you saying if I'm craving those chips, I should point at the bag and be like, hey, chips, you look tempting, but you'll make me feel bloated later?
You got it. It might feel ridiculous at first, but by verbalizing the action and its consequences, you make them more real.
I guess it's harder to ignore a bad habit when you're literally calling it out.
Exactly. Clear writes, hearing your bad habits spoken aloud makes the consequences seem more real.
Like it suddenly has more weight, instead of just letting ourselves slip into old routines.
Yeah, you're bringing it to the forefront of your mind.
But do you really think something as simple as saying things out loud can make a difference?
Absolutely. Remember, we're not aiming for overnight transformations. We're talking about small, incremental shifts in awareness.
Small changes, big impact. Got it.
Yeah.
And this technique can even be applied to like really simple tasks, right?
Exactly. Like, let's say you need to remember to send an important email.
Ugh, emails. Always forgetting those.
By simply saying out loud, tomorrow morning I'm going to send that email before my 10 a.m. meeting, you actually increase the odds of doing it.
Really? Just by saying it out loud.
It might sound too easy, but it works. It's about creating a stronger intention.
So it's like, by speaking it, you're making a commitment to yourself.
You're holding yourself accountable, even in a small way.
I can see how that would make a difference. It's like giving your brain a clear instruction.
It all goes back to understanding how our brains work. We're often operating on autopilot, and recognizing that is the first step.
So instead of being controlled by our habits, we can start to control them.
Exactly. And that's what's so empowering about all of this.
It's like we're taking back the reins.
Shifting from mindless repetition to mindful action.
It's like we're finally in the driver's seat. This has been such an eye-opening conversation.
It really makes you think, doesn't it?
It's incredible how much our brains are doing behind the scenes.
And how understanding that can actually help us make changes.
Yeah. It doesn't have to be overwhelming either.
Right. Even small things can make a difference.
Like just those little actions like pointing and calling out our choices can add up over time.
Small steps, big changes. Remember that paramedic we talked about earlier?
Oh yeah, the one with her father-in-law.
She didn't consciously analyze every little detail of his face, you know?
Right. It was more like...
Her brain had just learned to recognize the pattern after years of experience.
Like her intuition was built on all those subconscious observations.
Exactly. And it gives me hope that even those really ingrained habits can be changed.
It makes you realize that it's possible, right?
Yeah. It's just a matter of recognizing the patterns and then choosing to disrupt them.
And that's where tools like the Habit Scorecard come in handy.
It helps you shine a light on those autopilot behaviors.
And once you see them, you can start using those techniques like pointing and calling.
To break the pattern and make a different choice.
Exactly. And it's not about being perfect, it's about progress.
Absolutely. Don't get discouraged if you slip up. It happens to everyone.
Just notice it, acknowledge it, and get back on track.
And keep asking yourself, does this habit help me become the person I want to be?
If not, change it up. It's so empowering to know that we're not stuck with our habits.
If not, change it up.
Yeah.
So empowering to know that we're not stuck with our habits.
You always have the power to choose differently. This deep dive has given me a whole new perspective on the power of habits.
Me too. There's so much to learn.
And for anyone listening, I highly recommend checking out Atomic Habits by James Clear.
Yeah, we only scratched the surface today.
There's a whole world of insights waiting for you in that book. And if you enjoyed this conversation,
be sure to hit that like button.
And subscribe to Chapters Unfolded for more deep dives into amazing books and ideas.
We'll see you next time for another chapter.